So I'm sitting down with Brian Maas, who's the president of the California New Car Dealers Association, and we happen to be in the Le Meridian Hotel, where CNCDA is hosting a reception for all of their dealers. Well, I shouldn't say all their dealers. I should say all the dealers that made it, right? The relentless that made it somehow, some way to out here to New Orleans, because it's been a bit of an ordeal, hasn't it, Brian?
Yeah, the weather's been a challenge. The most snow in at least 150 years in New Orleans, over 80.
I was there 150 years ago. I can attest to that.
And, the city's not prepared for this. So no snow plows, no salt on the roads. Everybody just sort of going with the punches. But we're New Orleans, so here people figure it out.
It's interesting. I talk about all the time, Brian, that dealers are the most resilient business people, the most resilient industry in the world. I was at a great function, Auto Team America. Alan Haig was talking about some things, and it's really true. And we've been in this business for decades, and probably easily 2, 3, 4 times a year, it seems like something happens that's supposed to destroy the new car dealer, right? So whether it was Uber, or whether it was e-commerce, or whether it was Amazon, or whether it's whatever it might be, all that somehow is going to lead to the demise. And yet, it's 2025, here we are. So dealers are incredibly resilient. Certainly everybody who showed up is insanely resilient. I wondered if you might share, from your perspective, being involved with CNCDA and running this incredible organization of 1,300 dealers that you represent, where do you see challenges for this year, and what impresses you most about your members when it comes to resilience?
Well, I think they're so adaptable to whatever is coming their way. Obviously, most recently with the LA wildfires,
yes,
the dealers are helping their employees work through it. Many employees have lost their homes, but they're going to come out of it stronger. And that's the great thing about this industry, is dealers usually do that. I think challenges create opportunities. One of the major challenges this year is the effective date for the CARB ZEV mandate is coming. And
with 2026 models.
With 20,
so we can see that as early as possibly June or July.
Exactly. And the problem is no manufacturer our dealers represent are going to meet the mandate, which means we could have supply constraints, inventory challenges, and I think it's going to be our responsibility to educate dealers, their customers, policymakers, and others about what's coming and that adjustments are needed.
And that's really kind of the heart and soul, isn't it, of what CNCDA does, is being there to be an advocate for dealers, to stand in front of those legislatures, to stand in front of those people, to get the word out, to be able to effectively communicate. For example, you were talking about the wildfires. These dealers aren't just business people. I mean, they are literally part of their communities, right? I mean, they're oftentimes, there's the biggest contributor, one of the biggest contributors to the sales tax base. How much do they contribute in the course of a year? Do you know?
Oh, it's into the tens of billions of dollars. What the phrase I like to use is it takes about 10,000 Starbucks cups of coffee to equal the sales tax of one vehicle sold.
A lot of coffee.
The profitability of the average dealer, 1% to 2%, roughly speaking.
Yeah.
State and local government make 10% off of every new car sale. So they're in business with us, and we advocate for the dealers to remind the policymakers that we're in this together, whether they think so or not.
Or whether they understand.
Exactly.
Understand the implications or ramifications, the contributions these dealers make. I want to focus on just one thing, and that's CARB too, right? So it just seems like such a misguided act or regulation, right? Because they're looking for 35%, which at baseline is a completely unreasonable number. As you know, I did a lot of research to support you and the dealers' efforts. And when I broke it down, I have to say I was actually surprised, because you look at a company like Toyota. Well, I don't know of a company, honestly, that has done more to be a positive impact environmentally, because nobody's sold more environmentally friendly cars than they have, right, with their hybrids and the plug-in hybrids. And yet, they have such a small percentage infinitesimal percentage of sales in California with the BZ, they actually would stand to have the greatest penalty, even though they've been most aligned with what the California Air Resources Board says that they want. Second thing, if you peel off the 25% that we have currently in California and you take out the direct to consumers, it's only 12%.
Right.
And that's with a $7,500 tax credit. And that's with dealers losing thousands on every car sale. And that's with manufacturers losing tens of thousands.
Right.
So number one, you can't force me to buy something I don't want. Number two, you may be able to regulate, if you're the legislature, saying if I'm an OEM, I have to have 35%. But as a consumer, I'll just cross the state line and buy the ICE vehicle. And all of a sudden, we have a detrimental impact. California Resources Board, well, Paul, you said this, people might start buying more used cars that frankly have worse impact on the emissions.
Right.
Right. I mean, what's your take at this point, and what's your outlook on whether the Trump administration will be able to pull that waiver from EPA and be able to let us all wake up from this and say it was just a bad dream?
I think the way we're looking at it is the mandate is currently constituted. Nobody's going to meet it. We're not opposed to the goal of electrification or improving air quality or reducing greenhouse gases, but it needs to be a rule that can be complied with, and the current rule can't. So we need an adjustment in the rule. Whether that adjustment comes because the Trump administration revokes the rule or Congress passes some law or
Elon says, I've got to do this.
Or our policymakers in California relax enforcement for a couple years while we figure this out. It really doesn't matter which method gets us there. We just need to communicate to everybody that the rule has to be changed. And the goal doesn't necessarily have to be changed, but the rule has to be changed. And that's what our dealers are members of CNCDA to help us do, is advocate on their behalf. And when something isn't working, what do dealers do? They fix it. And that's what you do in your business. That's what our dealers do, is you help solve problems. This is a problem we're all going to have to work together to solve. And the first step is educating people about what this rule means for the average Californian.
It's so well said. You know, I was talking about the resilience of dealers. And one of the dealers, great dealers here that I just ran into as Mark Normandin. And, you know, that Normandin family, that Normandin name has been around forever. And one of the things that's really impressive about dealers is how they have stood the test of time. You know, I was mentioning to somebody a few weeks ago that I believe it was close to 50% of companies that were on the S&P 500, right? This is the best of the best. S&P 500 in the year 2000 are either gone or off that list, right? Some of them no longer in business, some no longer relevant. And yet, you talk about the Normandin family, and they have the Stellantis brands, obviously CDJR, which many people know is not the easiest brand. It's challenging, especially over the last couple of years. This is an organization that's nearly 150 years old.
Yeah.
They're still here. No matter what anybody throws, that family has stayed committed to that community, and they have figured out how to rethink and reinvent and stay relevant and be able to be a viable business out there. I mean, what impresses you most about your dealer members, and what are you most excited about going into 25?
I'm excited about meeting these challenges that we've been talking about the last few minutes. The dealers will help us do that. I'm excited about changes that are going to come with new product and the opportunity for dealers to adjust and in some cases reinvent themselves going forward. And you've been talking about it this whole conversation. It's how adaptive dealers are to change circumstances. And unlike the OEMs, the dealers are in touch with consumers every single day. whether they're in the service drive or the sales department or the parts department or F&I, they're hearing from consumers, and they understand immediately what changes have to be made to meet the needs of consumers. And that's the best part about working for the dealers, is how adaptable and consumer responsive they are. And that's why a business like the Normans has been around since 1875.
Yeah, it's so impressive. I mean, think about this. In the 150 years that they've been around, and there's so many of these stories across the country, you know, the Galpin organization, for example, I mean, there's just so many of them across the country. Brett Foudre is here from the Premier organization, and obviously so many of your dealers. Okay, they have literally outlasted manufacturers, parts departments, trends, innovations. Black Friday, Black Monday, 1987. Ford and GM's idea to go into the retail side of the business. Everything that has possibly come up, they've said, no problem. As you said, I'm going to adapt, I'm going to shift, I'm going to change, because failure simply is not an option.
Well, I think part of the culture of car dealers is they have to prove it every month.
Yep.
When the calendar changes to the first of the month, I got to meet my net. I got to sell the number of cars I need to sell to stay in business, pay my employees, contribute to the community. And if you have to do that month by month, quarter by quarter, year by year, you're going to be a resilient organization. And that's what's most impressive about the dealers in this business.
You know, the Super Bowl is going to be in New Orleans. I believe it's a week after we leave, right? And one of the things I think that's analogous to this, can you imagine a professional athlete, what you earn is based on what you did last month? Every month, right? You have professional athletes that will have a great year and sign a contract for 50 or 100, $200 million. And half the time, the sports fans, they never perform again. They never live up to that contract. These dealers live up to their contracts, right? And they do it every single month. And they stand by their communities, and they deliver it for their associates. And they always are trying to think up, to your point, what can I do next in order to be able to meet the expectations or exceed the expectation of my clients. On behalf of, as the next dealer, and on behalf of all these dealers, these 1,300 great dealers, and God knows how many dealerships they own, but on behalf of all of them, I just want to thank you for what you contribute to the industry, what your team contributes to the industry, and I'm really proud that Disruptive Growth Solutions, that we have the ability to help partner for you and for your dealer members, I should say, to support their efforts and help them have the best year possible. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate it.
Brian. Thank you.
You bet.